Good morning, everybody, and welcome to The Art as Well. This is series 5 of The Art as Well, and I think we're over 120 episodes in total. And I'm delighted to have the Irish artist Mick O'Dea with us this morning. Now, Mick has the CV as long as your arm, so I'm not going to repeat everything, but I'm sure during our chat we'd find out more about it if you're not familiar with him. So let's go straight over to Cliften and say good morning to Mick. Good morning, Mick. How are you?
I'm very good, thank you, Alan. I'm here in Cliften at the moment. We're in the middle of the 47th Cliften Arts Festival, and I have an exhibition of portraits on. The exhibition's title is Portraits, so it's pretty self-explanatory.
Sure.
It's in the Station House Gallery here in the Station House Hotel complex, where there's a complex of conference rooms and a theatre, as well as a gallery. So later on, today I'll be painting Theo Dorgan, the poet Theo Dorgan, and that will be painted in the gallery with an audience in attendance. So the audience won't be seated, they'll be walking in, looking at the exhibition, and myself and Theo will be involved in dialogue and conversation, and I'll paint the portrait. Be a head and shoulders, take approximately 2.5 hours, I would imagine. Okay.
And is he the only one you're doing, or are you planning to do a few more?
Bill Whelan as well will sit for me. He's going to sit next Wednesday. Mm-hmm. And then Fidelma Molan, the architect, will sit for me then on the Thursday. So I'm going to do 3 portraits in all, and starting off with Theo.
Yeah. So tell me, how long is that festival on for?
It usually runs for approximately 2 weeks, but it would be in around 10 to 12 days. It's full of lectures, recitals, lots of venues around the town. There's an arts trail, and it's always at the end of September. So it's quieter than usual in the sense that it's not high summer. You don't have loads of children every day, but I mean the school kids are heavily involved. It's very much community orientated, coming from the Clifton Community School originally. Yes. Under Brendan Flynn, so yeah, that's the nature of it. Great street theatre, yeah. Performance. It's got something for everyone, and this is my second time being involved. I had an exhibition here in 2017 of landscapes, which was, yes, part of the festival. This one obviously is portraits.
So if people are around the Clifton area and want to see it, how long is it going on till?
It'll be on until the 29th of September.
All right. Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Very good.
Yeah.
Very good. So listen, you're a Clare man, I know.
Yeah.
Because of certain connections with me as well.
Yes.
Clare.
Indeed. Ennis time.
Yeah. Yes, indeed.
Ennis in my case.
Yeah, that's right. So tell me about that and your upbringing there and your parents. Were your parents both from Clare?
Yes, my father was from Dara, which would be heading west from Ennis, and my mother was from a place called Kappa Fiad in the Crusheen district, heading north towards the Galway direction. Mm-hmm. Yeah, both from Clare. My father was born in 1908. He went to America with his brother in the 20s. They came back in 1939. Mm-hmm. They were in Boston mainly. And my mother went to England. She was born in 1919. She went to England, nursed there during the war as a midwife, came back around 1947, and both of them met and married. So he was a returned Yank, for want of a better way of putting it. She had already had her experience. So unlike so many of their colleagues, they were unusual in that they returned, whereas so many people that they had left with stayed on in the States and in England. We had a grocery shop and a pub in O'Connell Street, 66 O'Connell Street. My father was more interested in farming. We had a farm outside the town, yes, dry stock. He was very keen on horses, cattle, sheep. Saving hay was, of course, crucial to the whole business. But his main pleasure was going to horse fairs, Ballinasloe, Spancil Hill, Kilrush, any number of places. Yeah. My mother was a businesswoman, you know. She kept the show on the road. After she got married, she gave up nursing, but there was 5 of us. Mm-hmm. But she was very much hands-on, loved working in the shop, and had to do more of that when my uncle, who was a partner in the business with my father, and incidentally, my uncle Tom lived with us. He died in 1966.
Yes.
she became far more hands-on and loved engaging with the public. And the weekends in our grocery shop were quite phenomenal in the sense that it was a big social occasion. We would be doing up the messages for all the different families on a Saturday. Women from outside of town would come in to order their parcels, groceries, and they'd be sitting on stools, maybe having a sherry, lots of chat about all sorts of things. Bar would be pretty busy. Certainly on a Friday, Mart Day was always busy because my father might be involved selling a few cattle or buying a few cattle, and all my mother's brothers and her family, they were all farmers, and they'd come in from Crusheen. So it was the pub had even though it was a town pub and with a great town loyal custom base, we also had a very strong country base. Pub itself was opposite the local newspaper, the Clare Champion.
So it's still there now, is it?
The Clare Champion is still there now. The journalist,
your pub.
The pub is still there. My brother retired from it a number of years ago and is leased it to a great friend, Charlie O'Mara. He's the head of the vintners in Clare, and he is very able, runs it really well. It's a very nice bar. When I go down to Ennis, I like to go in there.
And what's it called, in case we're passing by?
O'Dea's Pub.
Okay, now, of course.
Yeah, it opens in the evening. It's very much a talking pub, so we don't do food or catering. Now, it's been described as the Donny and Nesbitt's of Ennis, and that was on the Irish Times on an article that was done about businesses in Ennis about 10 or 12 years ago.
So all the intellectuals congregate there.
We like to think that.
Very good. Very good.
We can always delude ourselves, but anyway, it's got a good base, good mix of people. The journalists used it all the time it was known as the front office of the Clare Champion.
Oh, really? Yeah.
And always, lots of good conversation, debates, discussion. So I guess one of the things about growing up in a public house, and our house is very much a public house, was the exposure you have to people. And it came to me when I was doing the eulogy for my late mother, Margaret, back in 2011, or it could be 12. It just came to me that growing up in our place when we were younger, and there was 5 of us, was like growing up in a corridor. There was just people coming and going all the time. And art, for me, drawing, provided a sanctuary, somewhere I could go, get offside, lock myself in my room and draw. We'd be on standby because we'd be required to work in the shop or the bar or whatever. So we often had to keep close to the base in order to fill the gaps when the place got really busy. And you didn't know when that was going to happen. Could be funerals, something could happen spontaneously, and you needed all hands on deck. So drawing and art was my quiet space and somewhere where I could escape to.
Okay. So were there any influences, like in school or something, that really decided that this is the career you wanted to pursue?
Yes, secondary school, primary school, and even infants. There was something about when we were in infants, we used chalk on blackboards. You probably remember that. Sure. I loved the tactile nature of it, the scraping and the wiping with a cloth. We used our blackboards then for marla or plasticine, make little figurines. And, I liked that. Primary school was the CBS in Ennis, and it was a very enlightened school at the time, if I have to say that the art classes that we had there were just phenomenal. On a Friday morning, the room would be cleared, all the desks up along the side, buckets of water, loads of paint, paper, and off we go. We were given free hand. Yes. We'd film clubs, all sorts of things, good theatre, plays, a lot of emphasis obviously on sport. And then I went to St. Flat with teacher Cyril Brennan. I have to tell you a story about Cyril Brennan. He wrote a report to my mother, the school report when I finished primary school, and said that I had an aptitude for art and it should be encouraged. So I had a studio when I was at the Centre Culturel Irlandais in Paris back in 2006 for a couple of months during the Beckett Centenary. I was doing work there. And there was a knock on my studio door one evening, and I answered the door, this man introduced himself as Cyril Brennan, and I said, that my old art teacher's, that was my old art teacher's name, and he was his son. And he was cultural attaché to the Irish Embassy in Paris at the time.
Really?
Just before I came on, Alan, this morning, I met a niece of his, Isabel, who had come from Galway to see the exhibition. She introduced herself as Cyril Brennan's granddaughter.
Yeah.
So it was lovely to meet her, and I told her about meeting Cyril Jr. And she informed me now that he's just been made the Irish ambassador to Colombia. And I think he'll cover Venezuela as well. So it's just one of those things. I moved on from there then to meet Jim Hennessy, our art teacher from Waterford, who'd just been appointed to St. Flannan's College as the art teacher.
Yes.
And that college was established in the 1840s. And as far as we know, nobody went to art school from that directly anyway. As far as we know, I could be challenged on that. But the year that we left, which was 1976, 5 of us went to our college. I went to NCD, the rest of the guys went to Limerick. But Jim was a big influence. He opened up a whole other corridor, opened up our imaginations and gave us possibilities. And then I suppose I went to NCAD. But the formative years were, I was facilitated in my interest. And my mother, you know, she was a great support. My father, no problems with him. I think I was due to, my brother took over the pub. I was, I suppose, to do the farming, but I ended up discovering art books in the library in Ennis, particularly the Time Life series on the lives of the artists, and that had a big influence on me. And I thought that, okay, there's another way, there's another vehicle that you can use to go through life. And it seemed to me that art was offering me the path that I think I wanted to take.
Sure. Now, Mick, I know you've a great interest in things military and his history, and you know, Irish history in particular, obviously, and that's reflected in quite a lot of your work. Was there not a possibility that you might have joined the army rather than going?
I seriously considered joining the cadets, and I had done a lot of work in that direction. And there was a number of guys in Ennis that I had a chance to talk to, and they were giving me advice. And I think at the end of the day, Alan, it was a simple case that you needed a science subject like physics or mathematics, and that wasn't going to be, that wasn't in my sphere or repertoire. And so that then at around 4th to beginning of 5th year, I had eliminated that as a possibility and decided to concentrate then exclusively on art.
So you left Ennis and you came up to Dublin to NCAD. How was that for you? Because it was a big change probably from your upbringing in Ennis.
Yeah, no, it was a breath of fresh air, really. One of the formative experiences I had was encountering Tom McGinty, alias Dice Man, who came from Glasgow in 1976 to Dublin and became a performer, a street performer, but he was also a model in the college. And he just seemed to occupy a completely different space. And to me, was the visual manifestation of this new life that I was embarking on, a life of creativity, I was hoping. You know, I found it fascinating to see him up in what was the Dandelion Market at the time, doing his stills. He was called the Dandelion Clown before he became the...
I never knew that. I remember him well, but I never knew that. No.
Oh, he was the Dandelion Clown.
Yes.
I just, you know, he was a brilliant model. Everybody wanted to draw him. And we did. We drew and drew and drew and painted and painted and painted him. And that lasted with me for my entire period in college. He was a model there and a brilliant model.
Yes.
He had the ability to know what you were interested, what the individual students were interested in, and could present that to you in order to stimulate you. And that was a time when models were just in the college if you needed to use them. You know, there wasn't special life drawing classes where you went all together. There was a model there. If someone needed to use a model, the model was available. So it was a great facility to have, even though when I was in college, I attended all the life drawing night classes because I wanted to work on my drawing. So I'd go to night classes with George Potter, John Coyle, and various other people. And then I became a model, a model for night classes. And that gave me an insight as well as how the different people taught drawing. So I was at both sides. And then I guess when I graduated, the late Professor Campbell Bruce recommended that I should teach drawing in first year, which was course studies. Myra McGuire, who was the head of course studies at the time, took me on. And I suppose over 16 or 17 years then, from doing a few night classes and blocks, I just got more and more integrated, and then I became more or less full-time by the time that I decided to give up teaching in the College of Art, which is now approximately 25, 26 years ago.
Okay, very good. Now, before we get into other aspects of your career, I want to concentrate now for a minute on your studio. Because your studio is based in Henrietta Street, number 6 Henrietta Street, and there's a number of artists there, and it's got a wonderful, wonderful history of not only the building but of the artists themselves who have worked there. So we're going to take a little break now. Earlier in the year, I think early summer, Maurice Quillinan, who visited you, said, "Alan, you got to get out to this guy's place and document that building." And I said, "Yep, no problem at all." So you very kindly allowed me to call into you. And we made this short film. It's only about 17 minutes of Henrietta Street and you talking about it. So just sit back for a while, Mick, and we'll have a look at that.
My class this year is just gorgeous, beautiful, kind of supportive bunch of people. Like, I'm really, really lucky to be progressive with like the people that I have in my class. Like, they're really, really on it. And just like, yeah, I just like so wholeheartedly really appreciate everything. So,
hello, Mick.
How are you, Alan?
How are you doing?
Good afternoon.
This is your space, your wonderful space.
Welcome to my world.
Now, this is something extraordinary greeting us at the door. Tell me about this chap.
That's one of my sculptures from an exhibition I had in the RHA in 2016. It's of Daniel O'Connell. He has a bird on his head in the finished piece, and it's wrapped up. So he's here. Looking for a home, Alan.
Yes, like everything else there.
So with one or two of them, with one large piece, along with the director Emile Denis, who was doing a film based on the exhibition or around the exhibition, he organised for explosive experts to come down, and we blew up the large one. So I have to find. I can't blow up Daniel O'Connell.
No, you couldn't do that. That wouldn't go down well. All right, shall we wander up?
Yes.
Great.
Mick Cullen's paintings on the wall.
Yes.
Daniel McKeown's in the hallway here.
Uh-huh.
We have Cathy Carmen's sculpture on the left and Mick Mulcahy piece here.
Where's Cathy's?
Cathy's is on the wall on the left. It's a plaster, it's a fiberglass.
Oh, yes.
Of the human body.
Yes.
So that's going back a long time. I don't know how far back.
Yeah. Cathy was on the art as well, as you know.
Oh, yes.
Yeah. Great. Okay. So we'll go on up. Who owns all these works?
These are the works of Mick Cullen.
Yeah.
Mick died 4 years ago now, and he had a studio just beneath me, beside his good friend and our friend Charlie Cullen, whose studio is behind the curtain. Mick was on the left. They were the first artists in the house, and they came here roughly 50 years ago, approximately 1975. As I say, Mick died 4 years ago, and Charlie doesn't use the place as much now. His son at the moment has got the unenviable task of trying to document everything and just make sure that it'll all be put somewhere, which is our big problem at the moment, Alan, because I've been here close to 40 years, but I've been working here on and off since 1978, 79. Had a studio here since 1987, but I feel, I'm saying 40 years, it's 37, but I worked for many years here prior to that without having a studio.
Yes.
So, a lot of memories. It's been the one stable thing in my life. I've had plenty of changes,
but the one thing that I could always rely on was Henrietta Street. So all good things come to an end.
Unfortunately, and how did it end up being a studio in the first place?
Well, it was due to the benevolence really of our present landlord's father, the late Unchan McKeown.
Yep.
He had an architectural firm. He bought a number of houses here in Henrietta Street, 3 adjacent to each other, and a number in Montroy Square, when it was neither fashionable or profitable. And he saved them really from destruction because he's a conservationist.
All right.
In fact, one of these early moves was to try and stop the closure of the Harcourt Street line, which obviously was unsuccessful at the time. But one of his last campaigns, apart from like being part of the people, like the group that saved Taylor's Hall, was to stop the demolition of 2 fine Georgian buildings on Clare Street, so that the National Gallery would have a much bigger frontage, which is why when one goes into the cafe now of the National Gallery in Ireland, that the 2 Georgian buildings that form one aspect of the wall had to be incorporated into the build rather than being demolished. 2 others were demolished, but they are there.
Yeah.
So that was part of his thing. So really, in the 70s, 80s and 90s, he was probably the biggest benefactor to artists in a very tangible way outside of the Arts Council, because his way of being an active patriot was, amongst other things, to provide good studios at a very reasonable price to artists, and I was one of the lucky artists that benefited from that.
Fantastic. And I believe the street is one of the, or if not the oldest Georgian street.
Yeah, it's the first Georgian street.
Is it?
It was called Primate's Hill because of the number of bishops and clergymen that had places here.
All right.
This house was belonging to, at one stage, the Archbishop of Armagh, or the Primate of Armagh, who was very active in the old Irish House of Parliament, and according to the blurb, affairs of state were sorted out at the nocturnal feasts in this house.
I see.
And there's a description of him as being an expert in all things pertaining to the good life.
All right. Jolly good.
It was originally built by Lord Inchiquin.
Yes.
From Clare, but he died before.
Another Clare man.
Another Clare man.
Yeah.
More illustrious, obviously, but he died before he could move in.
Yes.
And then they, after the Act of Union of the street was, this house dates from 1739, so these were the first Georgian houses, and they would have replaced the fashion for Dutch billies. Which so the houses that were in Dublin, there's very few of them left, but there was a lot of them left up until the 1950s. Were called Dutch billies. The gable end was very obvious as they faced the street, just like the houses in the Netherlands and in Amsterdam.
Yes.
But anyway, the fashion for looking at slates and gable ends went out, and as someone said about, as actually Charlie Cullen, the artist downstairs, he said the Victorians were so prudish that they even put dresses on the furniture so that you wouldn't see the leg of a chair, you'd be offended. And in the same way, when I think of Georgian buildings, and when you look up and you see the parapet, you can't see the slates.
Yes.
I think the Georgians had a thing about seeing slates that it might offend the eye, hence the parapet and the double roofs. So this was the first such Georgian building in Dublin, this one street, which the elite lived in.
Yes.
Eventually it became a slum.
Yeah.
There was an alderman from Dublin Corporation called Alderman Meath, and it was he that removed what was left of the grand staircase and all the fine fireplaces, and sold them to London. He was a slum landlord. And if you look here at these metal things, these are what are left when it was a tenement to stop the children from sliding down the baluster.
Ah, yes. You sure?
I'm after getting a pigeon in my studio. I hear wings.
Do you? Let's go up there then. Right, so talk us through this. You're on the sort of, I think, 3rd floor, are you?
Yes.
Yeah.
And whoosh, the pigeon, but they're out. As long as they haven't shat in the place.
Well, that's because you had the window open.
I had the window open.
Yeah. So let's have a look down. Was the King's Inns always there and for that purpose? Up the road. Let's just have a look up the road.
Yeah, the King's Inns were built around 1812, I think. So it's diagonal to the street, which is interesting. So they came later. The street was first.
Yeah.
The Tenement Museum is there.
The which, sorry?
The Tenement Museum.
Oh, yes.
The first building is the Pipers Club.
the famous Pipers Club, which moved from Thomas Street to here.
Okay, all right. So tell us about this room.
This room, before I moved into it, I had one studio. I have the floor now, but I had the back room originally as my studio. And this room was belonging to Tommy the Clock, or Tommy Flaherty, alias Tommy the Clock, whose speciality was restoring and working on particularly French late 18th century, early 19th century pieces. He lived here and worked in this room for a long time without electricity. All his machinery was all hand machinery, and he didn't have anything electrical. He was Dickensian in lots of ways.
Yeah.
Originally from Sligo. Studied watchmaking and clockmaking. I think he was in Switzerland for some length of time. Lived here like a hermit. Worked with his watches and clocks continuously. Died in 2010.
Yes.
Unfortunately, I wasn't able to be around for the funeral. I was away in Norway working at the time. But that was Tommy. He was here as well from the beginning. So I moved into this place and kind of made it my office. I call it Ifig Mick. And I keep my assorted materials, paintings, frames, books. I'm in the process at the moment of removing a lot of the books and putting them into plastic boxes, because I have to leave here, as I've said, in about 7 weeks' time.
Yeah.
So this is going to be a logistical nightmare. These are my collection of lead soldiers, which I haven't taken out yet, and these are obviously the what are left of the books.
Yes. Yes. Okay.
Storage is along here. I've been clearing the books from here, and with more storage here, and filing cabinets, as well as plan chests where I keep drawings and work on paper.
So there's going to be a mighty removal of everything at some point, isn't there?
Well, it's quite expensive and difficult. Like, for instance, you know, this would be a top drawer of some archival material, and each drawer has its own personality, and paintings, drawings. They have to be taken apart. These presses, they have to be taken apart. Drawings, paintings have to be relocated. They have to be put in vans. They have to, you know, they have to really just be removed, and it's I can't even begin to think of how we're going to do it. But it's the problem really for the artists, you know. We collect, we're like magpies.
Yes.
I envy writers, and now writers will have lots of stuff as well that have books. But they can move if they're going to work somewhere with their laptop or their pen and paper.
Yeah, it's a bit more manageable.
For artists, it's like being a bass player, a harpist, and a percussionist in an orchestra. You know, when you're moving, as opposed to maybe the first violin.
Yeah.
So you're bringing all that kind of extra stuff with you.
Let's look at your studio proper.
Okay.
Where it all happens.
So the great thing about this studio is the north light that I've always had.
Yes.
Now everything has changed. These are corporation flats. They're only about 24, 23 years old. It's a good example of why you need to use brick in Dublin. These are new student accommodation which has just come up in the last 3 or 4 years. The backs here were originally the coach houses. That's all going to change.
Yeah.
At some stage, but the city centre has caught up. In lots of ways, these studios, this house, is the last kind of outpost of late 1970s and early 80s Dublin, when artists could find a decent place to work and you weren't being pressurised out of it. And we were just lucky to have been able to stay for so long. But, you know, many artists in the 80s and 90s had spaces like this. It was not at all uncommon. Around Mountjoy Square, Temple Bar, Gardner Street, different parts of Dublin, artists could work and live and expect to survive reasonably.
Yes.
So in a way, this is the way a lot of artists lived. Not anymore.
So there's going to be almost impossible to find a replacement. At the moment, I've got some books. These are boxes of books that are being packed so that when the help comes, that the help will just be for lifting stuff down to a van.
I understand, yeah.
So I'm putting those together at the moment.
Fine. And tell me, you've obviously, you paint your portraits here.
Yeah, most of my exhibitions I painted here, but also I had a studio, and I lived in Mountjoy Square between 1999 and 2011.
Okay.
And I did a lot of work there, but most of the shows I've done have been done in this room here.
Okay.
Incidentally, the floorboards are interesting because I'm told that they were cut, pitch pine cut in the North America between 1700 and 1710, brought over to Dublin as ballast, and you can see that the knots are standing proud.
Yes.
From almost 300 years now of people walking on them.
Isn't that fantastic? Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, 300 years.
It should be, yes.
300 years of people walking.
Yeah.
And here you can see a mark on the ceiling which betrays a partition that would have been down to here.
Yep.
For subdividing the rooms when on average you had 10 people living to a room.
Mm-hmm.
This is burnt away here, so there was some kind of a stove inside that wall to heat the people here, and it's kind of burnt a gap.
Yep.
The metal, the range is still behind those shelves.
Oh, is it? Yes.
I had to cover them up about 10 years ago because insurance wouldn't let us light a fire here anymore.
Yeah.
So that really created lots of problems with what to do with all the bad drawings. Before you could always burn them now, now you just kind of have the paper lying around the place, you have to recycle it, whereas I'd much prefer burning drawings.
There's more of a ceremony to it.
Yeah, there was, and they actually served some function at the end, they kept you a bit warmer.
So, what sort of people would you have had here that you did portraits of? Any stick out in your memory?
Yeah, bishops, like the Dean of St. Patrick's, Dean Griffin, Victor Griffin, medical people, every artist, most of my friends, artists. Yeah, just most of the portraits that I painted would have been, I've painted of people here.
Yeah.
Now the president, I didn't paint the president here. I painted him in his in the artist, but the painting itself I did here.
This is Michael
not
G.
with him, not with him present.
Okay. Yeah.
But no, nearly every portrait I've ever painted has been painted in here.
Fantastic.
Yeah.
Yeah.
As well as many landscapes and a lot of the paintings as well on the War of Independence in black and tans. And stuff then that that is completely abstract work, that when I was playing around with different ways of working back in the late 70s, early 80s, I did a lot of non-representational work and just exploratory work.
Mick, that was great, fantastic. And really, it was a great opportunity to capture that place because there's so much history there, isn't there?
Yeah, the current landlord, who is Unshan's son, he's been really good to us as well, and I think that circumstances have overtaken. I mean, he would have had plans to refurbish that would have been ideal, but between one thing and another, I think that he has to let it go. And I'm not sure what the future plans are for it, but there's a feeling anyway that the street, as I said in the video, has changed quite a bit, and that it used to be an island separate from the rest of the city, but the development is creeping all around it. And when you're going in and out of the place now, you feel like that you're part of a museum. People stop and they're looking in, and it's a massive tourist attraction, which it hadn't been before, and I suppose it's just moving on. And that tourist attraction will draw attention to the fact that the buildings are in need of restoration. But the good thing is, at least they haven't fallen into disrepair, and in fact they have been maintained. And I know that our landlord, his priority, just like his father, was roof and gutters, and the roofs and gutters are very good. I think all of us realise that we've had a very good run. It couldn't go on forever, But for some of us, it was over 50 years. Not me, but some of the artists. Yeah.
Yes.
And times change, things move on, and that's where we're at the moment. You know.
So
And
you've got
we have until next July
yeah.
2025.
I
Yeah.
was just going to say that you have that, but at the same time, it still means that you've got a job in your hand.
Oh yeah.
On your
You know,
hands.
like it'd be virtually impossible to find anything comparable.
I know.
So we'll just see. You know, I think maybe as you get older, anyway, my desire would be to work as big as I could, but you know, you have to tailor what you do to wherever you find yourself. So you know, fortunately, I don't have a shortage of options. I have some options. You know.
Yeah. Well, you have a studio in Mayo, isn't that right?
I do, yeah. I have a house up in North Mayo in a place called Portacloy. It's a place that I love, and I'm involved with the Ballinglen Arts Foundation there. And in fact, it was the Ballinglen Arts Foundation in Ballycastle that drew my attention to that part of the country. Yeah. And I always would have been on the lookout for somewhere that I could live, that if I was to look out the window, I would want to paint it. And I found that place eventually, Portacloy, North Mayo. So I ended up buying a cottage, refurbishing, restoring it, building a studio beside it, and I spend a lot of time there, Alan, and I love it. Yeah.
So the chances are you bring a lot of your stuff from here, or from Henrietta Street to Mayo, would you?
No, I won't, because I'd end up packing it out. So it's a case of finding alternative storage space for it. You know. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So Mick, let's move back a little bit to when you left art college. How did your career develop? Because I know you've had a very illustrious career, which, you know, pinnacled, I suppose, when you were made president of the RHA, and you've done a lot of other things, and you're also, you correct exams for colleges, art colleges in the States and in England and Ireland. Can you tell us a little bit about that? How it evolved for you?
Yeah. Well. As a student in the college, I was always interested in drawing, grappling with drawing from observation, particularly life drawing, painting, the human figure. You know, it was something that I was really interested in.
Yes.
And I tried to develop my skills at drawing as much as I could, and went to a lot of night classes. I would go to George Potter's night class. I'd go to John Coy's night class. So I would do a couple of nights a week, additional drawing. And then I modeled. I was a student model, and I modeled for lots of life drawing classes in the college at night. Gave me an idea. That then gave me an insight into teaching drawing, teaching life drawing in particular. And when I finished college in 1981, I think Martin Maguire, who was the head of the department of foundation department, i.e. first year core studies, or what these called pre-diploma, they were looking for someone who could teach drawing part-time. And Campbell Bruce, the then director of fine art, recommended me. So I did some night classes for the first year students. You know, in the 1980s, got married, we had some children. And so it was important I did a lot of teaching. I would have taught in Dunleary School of Art, maybe a day a week, NCAD a day a week. I did work in St. Edmundsbury Hospital in Lucan. I used to work in the National Gallery, maybe a half a day. I do work in Portlaoise Prison. So I would have maybe 4, sometimes 5 different teaching jobs in a week that I would run around doing. And I took on a lot of that and was able to paint as well. Worked on I was with the Taylor Galleries at that time in the 80s.
Yes.
And did 3 shows with them in 83, 86, and 89. So the idea was I would take on as much teaching as possible, with the idea then of eliminating as I went along. To see what side of teaching or what place I felt most comfortable with. And to make a long story short, then I ended up teaching in NCAD more or less full-time then in foundation, not in fine art, but in foundation, where with a great team of people that I really enjoyed. And I really enjoyed working with first-year students and with staff as well, who had different disciplines, whether it was textiles, design, or whatever. A lot of it was about ideas. So a lot of teaching that for instance, the in 1987, I think it was 87, if I'm not mistaken, the Arts Council did an artists in prison scheme, and they asked Pauline Cummins to go to the women's unit in Mountjoy. I went to St. Pat's in Mountjoy, and Brian Maguire went to Portlaoise. And after, when the period was assessed, and incidentally, I had an incident in St. Pat's where I loved the 3 weeks that I did there over the summer. And on the day that I left, and St. Pat's was for young offenders, people under 18. On the day that I left, we had a party, and I sang a few songs, and the guys presented me with a little parcel. And I'd been talking about going to Paris. I was going to go to Paris shortly after that, just for a week or two, and I was telling them my French wasn't great. But they said, don't open that now, Mick, until you get outside the door. So I said goodbye to everybody and went outside the gates and got out the front gate. And then I opened the parcel, and it was a book, narrow little book, and I was very touched. It was English, French, English dictionary.
Yes.
And it was dedicated from me. And then when I opened up the next page, there was a big stamp on it saying property of Mountjoy Prison.
Lovely.
That's why the guys told me you shouldn't open it until you went outside. Now I have to confess, I never did give it back to Mountjoy Prison.
Sure.
But it was one of those things. But to make a long story short, Alan, Brian Maguire identified that in Portlaoise there was really a need for a higher level of teaching, and he approached NCAD, who at the time the director was Noel Sheridan, if anything could be done about that. So a woman called Teresa McKenna from Foundation and myself, we drew up a course with Brian, which would teach. It would be the equivalent of 1 year in our college if you were to do this course over a 2-year period in prison. So Teresa and I and Brian worked on that then for the best. I was there for the best part of 4 or 5 years, and in fact that course was very interesting and led to quite a number of the guys in Portlaoise going to our college, including 3 to NCAD. They didn't all finish it, but they went there, so that that would have been part of it. As for working abroad, I did some exchanges with Falmouth College, Manchester, and that would have been through Joe Wilson, who was a lecturer in NCAD at the same time as me, and he had a lot of contacts in the UK. And then Noel Sheridan asked me to do some work with the students, fine arts students, when I left the college in 1999 to concentrate full-time on art, on my own work. But I went back twice to bring students to the States, and I would have done external assessor in the Crawford, Sligo, and I did some work in Limerick as well, which I enjoyed very much. So that would have been part of that. I guess finally the teaching, when I left teaching, then I got more involved in the RHA, and the one thing that the academy didn't have was an instruction side to it. It was an academy and everything. It had the name academy, but we didn't have a school. So anyway, between one thing and another, I organized life drawing sessions for the academicians, so that we wouldn't just be talking at meetings, which could sound sometimes like local county council meetings, because you're not talking about art, you're talking about structures, and you're talking about procedure. Yes. So I wanted to create a forum whereby we might be discussing things other than that we needed to talk about drawing and art. And then these sessions gave the impetus to maybe start doing things more formally. And we had a studio upstairs, and we did some sessions back in around 2004, 5, 6 drawing sessions, which were the first ones really that were held in the academy since 1939, as far as I know, because it was around then that the school closed, around 1939. One of the reasons for that was that a lot of the academicians were teaching in the College of Art, and that in time created its own problems. But to make a long story short, I was involved with Stephen McKenna in setting up the rejigging and getting the RHA school open again.
Yes.
And that then gave the academy the impetus to rebuild. So we built the school on top of the structure and refurbished the galleries, etc.
Yeah.
And I was principal there, setting it up for about 4 or 5 years, followed by Joe Dunn. And we did it voluntarily. And now Colin Martin, who's really put the school on the map, and we're happy to say as well as the first fully paid school principal. So I've withdrawn from that again, and I'm involved in a few things. Like for some reason or other, I keep getting involved in things. I like it. I guess I like it. I chair the Stamp Design Advisory Committee for An Post, and I've been on that committee now for nearly 12 years. So it might be time to turn that over. And I'm on the board of the Ballinglane Arts Foundation.
Yes.
Which I've got. It's an amazing place, and so that's kind of my formal stuff. But
Okay.
I see myself now, Alan, of kind of fading it back a little bit more, and maybe getting time for more navel gazing, should I say?
Yeah.
Rather,
Very important.
Yeah,
Very important.
more of that, and I wake up in the morning, maybe wonder, well, what will I do today? That would be something that I would look forward to. Anyway, that gives you a resume of the teaching.
Yeah, no, that's very good. That's very
Yeah.
good. I think we go straight into look at some of your work.
I put this in, Alan, to show that it's an early painting. It's of my friend Simon McLeod. I painted that in 1981. We shared a flat. Our bedsits. We all had bedsits in a house in Percy Place in Dublin, and that was a painting that I did over the winter, over about a 3-month period, and I think is one of the things that gave me the confidence to keep working. When I painted that painting, it gave me a huge lift, huge kick. So this is both of us. After the painting, like in the summer, but you can see it's very much a winter painting. I have that in the exhibition here in Cliften at the moment, and I hadn't seen it in 43 years.
Maybe not. And does he own it?
His ex-wife owns it.
I see. Okay.
This is the hallway of Henrietta Street. It's a painting that I did within the last 10 years of the late Tony Rudinko. Tony lived in the basement, but had been associated with Henrietta Street for a long time. I showed that in the RHA maybe approximately 10 years ago as well, maybe earlier or later, I'm not sure. It's 150 by 120 centimeters. Tony, like we all lived in that house with extra layers on. This is a winter one, and Tony would buy a lot of secondhand clothes. He also danced with the Royal Ballet when he was younger. Also danced with Nureyev in Paris. Had an illustrious career as a dancer. And this is part of a series that I have been doing really, I suppose, since I first went into Henrietta Street, where I capture and paint the people who I encountered there. But anyway, it's more than a portrait. It's a portrait of the artist and the street. This is connected in a way as well. This goes back to when I was talking about Tom McGinty, the dice man. This was a plaster cast of his head that he used to make the masks that he became so famous for as he paraded and did different performances on the street and elsewhere. It's again quite a large painting, and I put the interior is of a nightclub in Berlin that survived the war and would have been in East Berlin, and is now a venue. And I thought, when I saw it, I was just blown away by it, and I thought it would be the right interior to put to Tom's head. The painting is called Our Friend Tom, Thom.
Yes, indeed, I remember it well.
Again, Henrietta Street. Formative influence on me was the artist Charlie Cullen, whose draftsmanship I admired tremendously. And this is a portrait of Charlie in his studio in Henrietta Street, and it was Charlie that enabled me to get a studio there in the first place. When I got a studio there, I felt like a made man, as they might say in Goodfellas, you know.
Yes.
Because the artists that I really admired most all had space there. And this is Charlie in his room beneath me.
Yeah.
Stephen McKenna, again, all these men, I guess, but Stephen McKenna, former president of the Academy, somebody who I admired tremendously as a thinker, as a painter. And he really enabled the school to reopen. And each president of the Academy has their portrait painted by one of the academicians. And he asked me to paint his portrait. And I said to him, dress the set. We went down to his studio in Bagnallstown, County Carlow. He's got a large painting of a Berlin scene that he had painted behind him, another painting behind that. So it's very much a studio artist in the studio, and the painting material is foregrounded, and the academic robe and chain of office is secondary to his self-identification as an artist.
Okay, and there's a very interesting story about the medal, isn't there? We'll find out in a minute.
Okay.
Yeah.
This just gives an idea of some ongoing, these were done on Innishlacken in 2020, and they are portraits of people that I was painting outdoors. So they all have that particular personality about them.
Yes.
Okay. Then, the artist walls change a lot. So no sooner would you be doing a series of portraits, well, then I might do a series of landscapes. You can see on the lower left, these are Henrietta Street landscapes, views out the back window. And that's always been a preoccupation of mine. I'll always paint the views outside the windows, and indeed interiors looking out. And then the other paintings are works that I did in 2020 during the lockdown, when I was located in North Mayo for that period of early March, April, May of 2020, when we had an incredible spell of weather that in many ways was like the last 2 days that we've had here in the West of Ireland.
That's right. Yes. Yes.
Here, this is a photograph of some landscapes on the studio wall in Mountjoy Square, dating from about 2006, 2007. And again, you're just putting stuff up and having a look. Most of these paintings are Portacloy, North Mayo, but some are from Galway. There's one or two from the South Wall in Dublin, and I think there's even one or two from out there in Howth, where I was painting with Una Seeley.
All right. Yeah. Yeah.
One of the paintings then from the South Wall. I've always gone to the South Wall to paint. It's just, you're in the middle of the city, and ironically, you're in the middle of nowhere. You're out in the middle of the sea. This is the half moon with the ferry departing for Holyhead. So it's simply just called Departure. But you can see how attractive the architecture and the buildings and the whole structure would be to a painter. Evening light, I tend to follow more and more these days, but it can be maybe a little bit souped up as well, but I love the glow when you get that beautiful golden evening light.
Yeah, the golden hour.
The golden hour. Another one of those pieces then done around the time of the lockdown. I'm showing landscape, I guess. I'm showing portraits because they're very important to me. And as I said to someone once, I make portraits of the landscape and landscapes of people's faces,
Yes.
This is Port Urlin, the neighbouring village to me, fishing village in North Mayo. It's acrylic on paper, and I use the acrylic like watercolour. Similar to this, there are opaque patches in this as well as transparent patches. So it's always looking, Alan.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. This is one we've seen before on the wall.
Yeah.
Your collection. Yeah.
I love dark skies with sunshine shining and illuminating things.
Yes.
Change is as good as a rest, so quite often I just will get a still life, and I won't go any further usually than just the tablecloth, and use them to contemplate. And in lots of ways, it reminds me of when I was an altar boy and the crisp linen and the whole ceremony around maybe putting wine and water in glass vessels on it. But it's more, they also have a presence. So
Yes. Beautiful. Yeah.
Sometimes then the table or the object will have something on it, and there's an exterior view. So that's the studio in Henrietta, or in the RHA. And then ongoing work about the War of Independence. These are from, I think, 2009, if I'm not mistaken. And it's preparatory work for a series of paintings that I did around the War of Independence. This was for Black and Tan in 2010 in the Kevin Kavanagh Gallery. I did 3 exhibitions there in 2010, 12, and 14. As I said to you earlier on, tongue-in-cheek, you couldn't go wrong about doing an exhibition about an organization that was named after 2 colors. So those 2 colors were predominant then in the first of those shows.
Yeah.
Installation. Next show then was called Trouble, and I had moved out of my studio in Mountjoy Square at that stage. I had 2 studios at one stage, Alan, believe it or not, and then back into Henrietta Street. So this is work on the wall in Henrietta Street.
Okay.
Work in progress. Some individual paintings then. This is of Countess Markievicz making appeals for money for the cause of independence at a meeting in Boston, from a black and white photograph with such an iconic image. And then I guess it's an oil on canvas and a particular way of treating it.
Yeah. Mick, as a matter of interest, do you work from photographs, or would you prefer to work from real life? Or do you do a combination of both?
At one stage, I only would work from life. And then when I got interested in the War of Independence series and started examining, or as I like to say, interrogating photographs, I started to really enjoy the freedom that working from photographs affords. And now that work also now actually translates into that I now will take photographs of people when I'm painting them, and might often use the photograph to finish the portrait. Yes. And in some cases, I'll work from photographs to do the portrait. So I broke down any prejudice that I had towards working from photographs. This is an example of a painting from a photograph. It's part of the series of eviction scenes from the 1880s, and in this particular case, it's the Vandeleur estate in County Clare. And what I found interesting was that the people who had come, in other words, the military and the whole system that was evicting landless peasants, they were dressed in wonderful finery. It looked like a Gilbert and Sullivan operetta. So you have the King's Hussars with their magnificent uniforms, Sherwood Foresters. I'm not sure about the other one. It could be the Gloucestershires. And then you have the RM, the regional magistrate, who was hitting people with send them to jail as soon as they were evicted. And then the RIC inspector, and the actual lettering then looks like carnival lettering, eviction party.
So once you're working on a black and white photograph, presumably you were able to get references to show what actual colors they were.
Yeah, I would do the research, find out what the regiments were, and look at the details of color, etc., and then use it in that way.
Yes.
Maybe, like for instance, they weren't standing in a dung heap on the original one, but something like that.
Yeah, sure.
Then meeting, this is a photograph of Elizabeth Burney in the middle, and her 2 daughters, Catherine and her other daughter, at the show I did in 2012, I think, or 14, the Kevin Kavanagh Gallery. And she happens to be the daughter, and they're the grandchildren of Rishtard Mulcahy, who took over from Collins after Collins was killed in Bale of Law. And I painted a portrait of Elizabeth that was unveiled last month, and she's 103 now and flying it.
Fantastic.
Yeah. So that series of paintings opened up a whole new audience to me. But I'd known them before that. This is part of the installation of a show that I did in the gallery, the RHA gallery in 2016 called The Foggy Dew. And the painting on the left, which you referencing Steve McKenna, that's Joseph Malachy Kavanagh, the keeper of the Academy, running from the burning RHA building, which was the biggest cultural loss of 1916. And the only things that he saved from the original RHA building, which was on Abbey Street, the facade still exists, was the President's Medal and the Royal Charter. So that medal that I wore when I was president at the time, I was very conscious of Joseph Malachy Kavanagh saving that, and his life's work was lost on the top floor. He would have been looking after the school and the collection. He had studied previously with Osborne in Antwerp, and a year and a half later he was dead. I think the whole thing devastated him.
Yeah.
The only works, wonderful painter, you'll find some of his works in auctions, but it was only works that had been sold prior to 1916 that come up in auctions, because most of his work was destroyed in the blaze.
Yeah. And on that point, Mick, wasn't there the annual exhibition being shown at the time? And as a result of it all going up in smoke.
Yeah, the annual exhibition, which had approximately the same number of works that was in this year's exhibition of 2024, they were all destroyed, along with all the books, libraries, and collection that the Academy had built up. I have some paper floating there, which is not really visible in this slide, but there was a gift of the disasters of war sent by the Spanish government to the RHA, Goya's Disasters of War. And on that particular piece of paper, or that print that's floating there, is the execution of Spanish guerrillas by French soldiers. So that again is referencing what was to happen a week or two later, after the rising was quelled.
Yeah.
I also mentioned to you, Alan, that
1916
was the only time that all the artists who exhibited in the RHA got paid.
Because of the insurance.
Exactly. Part of the installation, various large paintings, and then a series of images of the leaders of 1916.
Okay.
And I did a series of sculptures because the whole thing was very dramatic, and it was the part of the rising that I concentrated on was between Parnell Square and College Green. And it's as if they picked the best possible stage set to enact this tragedy or glorious revolution, or whatever way you want to see it. At the end of the day, it led to O'Connell Street has never recovered from 1916, has gone into a steady decline ever since.
Yeah. Okay.
It's the Foggy Dew. So this is referencing Britannia. She's proactive, coming in on a ship.
And this is our fate.
Yeah, well, Emile Deneen was a director of a documentary film called Battlefield, which he did on the show, the preparation for the show and the show itself. And that film was in the IFI, premiered in the IFI. It was lovely. It was part of, I think it was funded, part of the funding came from the Decade of Commemoration, and this was an exhibition within that. So we were trying to discuss, what did we do? Will I burn the sculptures because they're just hanging around the place? What did we do? And so Emile had a suggestion, and I went with it. In fact, I was very happy about it. So the next shot will show you what actually happened, that piece of sculpture. So we blew it up.
Yeah. Yeah.
And, in lots of ways, Irish public monuments, a lot of them were blown up. The most recent one, of course, being tragically Nelson's Pillar in O'Connell Street, which added to the further decline of the street. But anyway, we thought it would be an appropriate way to send the piece of sculpture off to what I called cardboard nirvana.
Yeah, but at least Daniel O'Connell has survived.
For the moment.
Yeah. Very good. Thank you very much for that. Now, I'm going to open it up to the floor, and while you're getting ready for that, I'm going to read out a few comments. Pauline Flynn says, "Great to see your studio, Mick, and delighted that this record of it is now exists." Yvonne, I wonder, do you ever do sea portraits? Seascapes, I presume. Well, we saw one or two of them there.
No, I do a lot.
No, sorry, it was self-portraits. I don't know what I wrote.
Well, it says C, so I forgave
Oh,
you
I'm
the
so
A.
sorry. Self-portraits, I was wondering. Mick, you do so many of others.
Yeah, fair
Yes.
enough.
I used to do a lot of self-portraits to practice painting. And the ironic thing for me is that when people sit for me, I ask them to try and be as relaxed and natural and casual as possible. But I find that when I'm painting myself, I'm starting to pose. So I've decided not to paint any self-portraits. I've become too self-conscious, but I've had a way around it. I use 2 mirrors and usually do the back of my head.
Well, it's time that somebody else did one of you then. Okay, sorry, just while I'm on, Mick, listen, you're so prolific for one artist or for one human being, I've always thought. And the fact that you do portraits and do landscapes and then run on a theme, I seem to be a little bit like that myself. And I get overwhelmed because I say I have too many areas of interest and that I haven't enough lifetime certainly left to do all I am interested in. And I wondered how you deal with that. And I don't, by the way, see you retiring or taking it easy anytime soon, because I think your head is still full of, I'm sure, ideas and things. Yeah. So how do you cope with that?
I suppose at one stage I was looking for maybe what I might call a premature synthesis of trying to get everything together in one kind of body of work. But then I accept that you can have things running concurrently. And the way I accept it is that a change is as good as a rest, Yvonne. You know, that, and if things happen to me somewhere along the line in a stream, if the tributaries kind of join up, but I have found that various techniques and various ways that I have of looking that and making work in one area they've started to fuse a little bit more in terms of technique and things feeding into each other. But I'm quite happy to have different streams running concurrently without trying to prematurely make them join some way further up the line. I'd see what happens. Yeah.
Very good. Thanks very much for that, Yvonne.
Thanks.
Thank you. Bridget Connaughton says, fascinating and interesting interview. Marianne, great portrait of Charlie. Nice. Desmond, have one of Stephen McKenna's paintbrushes attached to the wall of my studio.
Oh, nice.
Catherine Green, so amazing to see so much of your wonderful work. Very, very impressive. Thank you for this great interview, Catherine. Thanks, Catherine. Eileen O'Donovan, really enjoyed this interview. Thank you both. Marianne, the same, great interview. Thank you both. Mary McGrath, extraordinary career, a unique body of work documenting both a lifetime and changing times in Irish history. Fantastic. Diane McGee, wonderful interview. Thanks, Mick and Alan. Eilish, very informative interview. Thank you. Carol, amazing interview. Great to see your studio. Loved the Foggy Dew show. Thank you both. And Colin Eaton says your observations of your surroundings, on your surroundings and the life are always fascinating to hear. Enjoyed the studio tour and thank you for the work. Okay, Margaret, thanks for showing your wonderful work. Great interview. Thanks very much. So anybody else would like to say anything in person? Carol?
Hi, can you hear me?
Yeah, can now, yeah.
Hi, Mick. I just wanted to say that the one thing I remember about Mick was when I was in the life room at the life drawing or the RHA, I was really nervous. And Mick always gave a word of encouragement. And you've no idea how relaxed, when I saw you drawing, you infused a freedom in me to draw. You were just going at it, and I said, just go at it, just do it.
Yeah.
What I want to say off the subject, if you want a hand, I have an old Jeep that I use for carting stuff around. There's no seats in the back of it. So if you ever want in July to move precious stuff, give me a shout.
I certainly will, yeah. I'd fancy using an old Jeep.
And it's 21 years old and it's just had a new clutch in and it's fine.
Yeah.
It's reliable.
What kind is it, Carl? It must be very fond of it.
Toyota Prado.
All right, nice.
Boats and stuff. It's great. It's an old horse,
Yeah. I'd certainly bear that in mind. Thank you very much for both the offer and for your comments. Thank you.
Thank you so much again.
Pleasure.
The sort of things that result from these chats, Peggy McNulty says, excellent and fascinating interview. Thank you both. Thanks for that, Peggy. Anybody else like to make a comment before we wrap up?
I'd like to thank everybody for taking the time and trouble, Alan, and for you particularly. I wish to thank you for arranging this and being so thorough and coming to the studio earlier on and taking the footage that you took and the preparation for this. And eventually we got a clear signal on the phone. So it's a nice way to wrap it. But it's been a pleasure working with you. Congratulations on what you've already done and the record that you're leaving, which will be a fantastic legacy. And you know, how easy it is to work with you.
Thank you very much. I appreciate that.
Yeah.
Colin Eaton calls you a true gent. Thank you.
Ah, Colin, another true gent.
So look, thanks so much for everything you've done and for your time. I mean, you put a lot of time into this as well, and for the filming earlier on in the year. I wish you every success. What just to finish, what are your plans for the future, immediate future? Have you anything in the offing?
No, I don't really. There's a couple of possibilities. Maurice Quinlan there is I'm involved with, and we're working. He's working. He's always spearheading. He's got great ideas and initiatives.
Yeah.
I mean, he moves mountains. So we're discussing. He's discussing a project, a possible forthcoming project with me and a few other artists. There's just a couple. Nothing major, Alan. Ongoing portrait commissions, a number that I have to finish, fortunately.
Yes.
So that I enjoy engaging with them, but I have no immediate plans. I mean, I have some work in a show in the Customs House in Westport at the moment, a group exhibition, which is all about the reconstruction of lookout post LOP 63, one of the lookout posts that were built all around the country during the Second World War. Yeah. A number of artists have got together in the area that I have the house in Portacloy, and that has been rebuilt and launched in and around about 3 weeks ago, with the Customs House exhibition being central to that. Apart from that, then I have to show here, and I guess ongoing commitments with the Molesworth Gallery in Dublin, who represent me. So that nothing much more than that, Alan.
Oh, it's plenty.
Yeah.
As I say, an artist never retires.
Indeed, never. Indeed. Yeah. We're lucky that way. We're like farmers.
Exactly. Yes. Listen, thanks again, Mick, and thank you all for watching. I really appreciate it. And I'll see you in 2 weeks' time. Okay, for another art as well. Bye-bye, everyone.